In the modern world, we are conditioned to believe that the pursuit of success is a marathon with no finish line. We are told from a young age that if we just work a little harder, earn a bit more, or reach that next professional milestone, we will finally arrive at a state of lasting contentment. Yet, for many high achievers, this promise proves to be a mirage. No matter how much they accomplish, the goalposts simply shift further down the field. They find themselves trapped in a cycle of perpetual striving, where the joy of achievement is immediately replaced by the anxiety of the next challenge. This book is designed to break that cycle. It is an exploration of a fundamental shift in perspective that can transform not only your productivity, but your entire experience of being alive. The journey we are embarking on is about moving away from the chase and toward a state of grounded, intrinsic fulfillment. We will examine why some of the most successful people in the world often feel like failures, and how a simple change in how you measure your progress can unlock levels of performance you previously thought were out of reach. You will learn that happiness is not a reward for future success, but rather the very engine that drives it. We will delve into the psychological mechanisms that keep us feeling not enough, and provide you with the tools to reclaim your sense of agency. By the end of this book, you will understand how to stop living in the shadow of an unreachable ideal and start living in the light of your actual progress. You will discover that your past is a goldmine of evidence for your own capability, and that by learning to harvest the lessons from every experience, even the painful ones, you become psychologically bulletproof. This isn't just about feeling better, it's about a more effective, sustainable way of navigating a high-pressure world. We are going to redefine what it means to win, ensuring that your achievements actually bring you the satisfaction you've worked so hard to earn. This book serves as a comprehensive guide to mastering your internal narrative. At its core, it explores the dichotomy between two distinct ways of perceiving your life, the gap and the gain. Most people spend their lives in the gap, a psychological space where they measure themselves against an idealized future version of who they think they should be. Because this ideal is always moving, they remain perpetually dissatisfied, stressed, and prone to burnout. Conversely, living in the gain involves measuring your current self against your past self. This shift in focus allows you to see the tangible progress you have made, fostering a sense of competence and gratitude that fuels further growth. Throughout these pages, we will explore the profound implications of these mindsets. We will look at how the way you frame your history affects your physical health, your creative output, and your longevity. We will examine case studies ranging from Olympic athletes to business moguls and children overcoming neurological odds. You will be introduced to the concept of psychological flexibility, the ability to adapt to setbacks by reframing them as opportunities for learning. We will also provide practical, actionable frameworks, such as the 90-day review and the experience transformer, to help you institutionalize these habits in your daily life. The goal is to move beyond theoretical understanding and into a lived reality where you are the conscious author of your own happiness, tracking your evolution with precision and celebrating every step of the way. To understand the power of mindset, we must first look at the career of Dan Jansen, a man who became a legend in the world of speed skating, but not before enduring a decade of what many would call professional heartbreak. In 1984, Jansen was a 16-year-old prodigy. He possessed raw talent and an incredible work ethic, yet when he competed in the Winter Olympics that year, he fell just short of the podium. He nearly won a medal, a phrase that would come to haunt him for the next 10 years. Despite being one of the fastest human beings on ice, a gold medal seemed to be an impossible ghost that he could never quite catch. Year after year, race after race, bad luck and immense pressure seemed to conspire against him. By the time the 1994 Winter Olympics in Lillehammer, Norway arrived, Jansen was at a crossroads. He had already performed poorly in his signature events earlier in the Games. He was staring down his final chance, the 1,000-meter sprint. Statistically, his chances were abysmal. Most athletes in his position would have been consumed by the weight of past failures, the fear of another looming defeat, and the crushing expectation of a world watching him fail one last time. This is the classic gap mentality, focusing entirely on the missing gold medal, the not enough status that had defined his Olympic career thus far. However, as Jansen stepped onto the ice for that final 1,000-meter race, something fundamental had shifted within him. He made a conscious decision to abandon the heavy burden of needing to win to be happy. Instead of looking at the empty space where a medal should be, he looked back at the gain. He took a mental inventory of his entire journey. He thought about the mentors and coaches who had poured their wisdom into him. He visualized the breathtaking places his sport had allowed him to visit. Most importantly, he reconnected with the visceral, simple joy of the blade hitting the ice, the pure satisfaction of the sport itself. Jansen decided that this final race wouldn't be a desperate grab for a trophy, but a thank-you note to the sport of speed skating. He decided to skate out of gratitude rather than deficit. The result was staggering. With a genuine smile on his face, Jansen didn't just win the gold, he shattered the world record. By letting go of the external requirement for happiness, he unlocked a level of physical performance that his previous, stress-filled mindset had blocked. This story illustrates a critical flaw in the logic of high achievers. Many of us harbor a secret fear that if we are too happy or too satisfied, we will lose our edge. We believe that misery is the fuel of motivation, that we must be hard on ourselves, constantly dissatisfied and perpetually hungry to keep moving forward. We view happiness as a finish line we reach only after the work is done. But science and high-performance psychology tell a different story. When you operate from a place of negativity, stress, and gap thinking, your brain enters survival mode. The amygdala takes over, triggering a fight-or-flight response that narrows your focus and kills lateral thinking. In this state, you are less creative, less capable of solving complex problems, and far less resilient to change. You are essentially trying to drive a car with the emergency brake engaged. Conversely, when you are in a positive frame of mind, what we call gain thinking, your brain's executive functions flourish. Studies consistently show that a positive mindset leads to higher levels of confidence, enhanced creativity, and better adaptability. When you are happy, you aren't lazy, you are optimized. Dan Jansen won because he stopped needing the win to validate his existence. His happiness became intrinsic, something he generated from within by appreciating his journey, and that internal stability provided the platform for his greatest external success. If you look for your sense of worth in external markers, the next promotion, the next million, the next trophy, you are effectively surrendering your power to factors you cannot control. You become a slave to a treadmill of hustle that has no end. But when you take ownership of your happiness by choosing to appreciate your life as it is right now, you reclaim that power. You realize that you don't need anything else to be fulfilled. You can choose to be in the gain at any moment, and ironically, that is exactly when you become most likely to achieve the very things you once chased so desperately. The impact of our internal narrative extends far beyond our professional performance. It literally gets under our skin and alters our biology. To understand the depth of this connection, we can look at a fascinating study involving an unlikely group of subjects, 180 young women entering Catholic convents. In the 1930s, these would-be sisters were asked to write short autobiographical sketches as part of their admission process. Decades later, researchers analyzed these letters, looking for a correlation between the emotional tone of their writing and their eventual health outcomes. The findings were nothing short of revolutionary. The researchers discovered a direct and powerful link between the positive or negative outlook expressed in those early letters and the nuns' total lifespan. The sisters who expressed more positive emotions, gratitude, hope, and joy, lived, on average, 10 years longer than their more pessimistic or neutral peers. In fact, 90% of the most positive groups survived past the age of 85, while only about 33% of the least positive group reached that same milestone. Consider the gravity of that. The way these women perceived their lives in their early 20s acted as a predictor for their longevity 60 years later. This wasn't because the positive nuns had easier lives. They all lived in the same environment, ate the same food, and followed the same daily routines. The difference was entirely internal. Their mindset was a biological regulator. This link between the mind and the body is well documented in modern medicine. We know that chronic unhappiness and gap thinking, the constant feeling that you aren't enough or that your life is lacking, triggers a sustained stress response. This floods the body with cortisol and adrenaline, which, over time, weakens the immune system, increases inflammation, and makes us more susceptible to everything from the common cold to chronic heart disease. People living in the gap take more sick days and recover more slowly from injury because their bodies are stuck in a state of defense. On the flip side, a gain mindset can actually improve physical health without any change in external behavior. A striking example of this is a study conducted with 84 hotel housekeepers. These women worked a physically demanding job, cleaning rooms all day, yet most of them did not consider themselves active or healthy. Researchers split them into two groups. The first group was given a simple presentation explaining that their daily work, changing linens, vacuuming, and scrubbing, actually met the Surgeon General's recommendations for an active lifestyle. They were told that their job was, in fact, great exercise. The second group, the control, was told nothing. After just 4 weeks, the results were measured. The women in the first group, the ones who now perceived their work as beneficial exercise, actually lost weight, lowered their body fat percentage, and saw a significant drop in their blood pressure. Their behavior hadn't changed. They cleaned the same number of rooms in the same way. The only thing that changed was their asterisk perception of their activity. By shifting from a gap, my job is just a tiring chore, to a gain, my job is a health-building workout, their bodies responded as if they were going to the gym. Living in the gap is a form of self-criticism that acts as a slow-acting poison. It keeps you in a state of chronic anxiety, always looking at what is missing. Over the years, this overwhelms the system, leading to burnout and physical decline. But living in the gain provides a biological buffer. When you give yourself credit for your progress and see every experience as a source of value, you lower your stress hormones and activate your body's natural healing and maintenance systems. Transitioning into a gain mindset is not a one-time event. It is a practice. Because our brains have an evolutionary bias toward noticing threats, the gap, we must consciously train ourselves to see the gain. One effective way to do this is to enlist accountability buddies. These are trusted friends or colleagues who are authorized to gently point out when you are sliding back into gap talk, when you are complaining about what hasn't happened yet instead of celebrating what has. Additionally, you can formalize the practice by regularly listing your recent achievements or finding hidden gains in difficult situations. With consistent effort, the gain becomes your default setting, transforming not just your mood, but your very vitality. One of the most profound barriers to sustained motivation is our tendency to forget how far we've actually come. This phenomenon is perfectly illustrated by the story of a young girl named Rosie, who was born with a severe and rare brain disorder called lissencephaly. The medical prognosis was bleak. Doctors informed her parents that Rosie would likely never gain the ability to learn new physical skills. The ideal for a child her age, running, jumping, playing, seemed entirely out of reach. However, Rosie's parents and her dedicated physical therapist refused to live in the gap of what Rosie should be doing compared to other children. Instead, they focused entirely on Rosie's gains. They spent hundreds of hours working on minute movements. Within a year, Rosie achieved something the doctors thought impossible. She learned to walk on grass and other uneven surfaces. This was a monumental victory. Yet, an interesting thing happened. As Rosie became more confident in her walking, her parents and those around her began to take it for granted. The new normal set in so quickly that they almost forgot the time when she couldn't walk at all. This is a universal human trait. Our brains are wired for efficiency, which means that once we master a skill, we move it to autopilot. We stop consciously thinking about it, and consequently, we stop valuing it. This is why Rosie's therapist insisted on keeping meticulous, detailed notes and scheduling regular progress calls. By forcing the parents to look back at the specific data of where Rosie started, she ensured they stayed in the game. This conscious celebration of progress wasn't just feel-good fluff. It was the essential fuel that kept everyone motivated to continue the grueling work of therapy. If you don't track your progress, you will inevitably succumb to the future ideal fallacy. Many people measure their success against a vision of their perfect future self. The problem is that the ideal is like the horizon. As you move toward it, it moves away from you. The ideal is a useful North Star for direction, but it is a terrible yardstick for measurement. When you measure yourself against an ideal, you will always be in the gap because you will never actually arrive. The future isn't real, it is a mental construct. The past, however, is concrete. It is full of data, evidence, and hard-won victories. To break free from the gap, you must learn to measure backward. Take a moment right now to perform a decade audit. Think back to where you were 10 years ago. What were you worried about then? What were your skills? How did you spend your average Tuesday? When you look closely, you will realize that the person you were 10 years ago would likely be astonished by what you have achieved today. You have solved problems that used to terrify you. You have acquired knowledge that was once a total mystery. When making this list, do not fall into the trap of only counting material gains like salary increases or job titles. While those matter, the internal gains are often more significant. Think about how your mindset has matured. Think about the difficult, stressful, or even traumatic events you've navigated in the last decade. What did those events teach you? How did they make you more resilient? Every failure in your past contains a gain in the form of a lesson learned, provided you take the time to identify it. Once you've completed the 10-year review, repeat the process for the last 3 years, and then for the last 90 days. The 90-day window is particularly powerful for maintaining momentum. When you realize how much you can actually accomplish and learn in just 3 months, you stop feeling stuck. You begin to see your life as a series of continuous upward shifts. This practice fires up your brain's reward centers, flooding you with the confidence and motivation needed to tackle the next 90 days. By celebrating your wins and tracking your evolution, you aren't just looking at the past. You are building a clearer, more confident path toward the future you desire. On September 29, 2008, the global financial markets were in a state of total collapse. For Howard Getson, a professional trader, it was a day of personal catastrophe. In a matter of hours, Getson watched as $2 million of his capital simply vanished. It was the kind of loss that could break a person, a massive, gaping hole in his finances that felt like a total loss of control. In that moment, Getson was standing at the edge of a deep, dark gap. He could have spent the rest of his life mourning that money, blaming the market, and identifying as a victim of circumstance. But Howard Getson did something different. He allowed himself to feel the shock, but then he engaged his curiosity. He realized that while he had lost a fortune, there were other traders who had made a fortune that same night. This meant the money hadn't just disappeared into a void, it had moved. He began to ask himself, why did their strategies work while mine failed? What did they see that I missed? By the following morning, Getson had undergone a total psychological shift. He decided to stop viewing the $2 million loss as a defeat and started viewing it as a very expensive tuition fee for a transformation. This shift in perspective led him to pivot his entire business. He and his engineers began developing cutting-edge software that utilized artificial intelligence to adapt to volatile market conditions, the very conditions that had previously wiped him out. Losing that money was the catalyst for creating a much more robust and successful company. Getson turned a $2 million gap into a multi-million-dollar gain. What Getson demonstrated is a trait known as psychological flexibility. This is the ability to stay in the present moment, manage intense emotions, and, most importantly, proactively choose the meaning of your experiences. Most people are psychologically rigid. When something goes wrong, they have a fixed, negative interpretation of it. They see a setback as a permanent statement about their worth or their future. But those with psychological flexibility understand that while they cannot control external events, they have absolute sovereignty over what those events mean. This journey toward flexibility begins with a radical act of ownership. You must take responsibility for everything in your life, not in the sense of blaming yourself for bad luck, but in the sense of owning your response to it. You are the author of your own narrative. If you experience a setback, you can choose to write it as a tragedy, or you can write it as the inciting incident that leads to your eventual triumph. One of the most effective tools for developing this skill is an exercise called the Experience Transformer, developed by Dan Sullivan. It is a simple but profound thought experiment designed to strip the sting out of a negative event and harvest the value within it. Whenever you face a challenge, a mistake, or a disappointment, take out a piece of paper and answer 3 specific questions. 1. What did I gain from this experience? Look for new skills, new information about the market people, or a new understanding of your own limits. 2. What would I do differently next time? This turns the mistake into a strategic blueprint for the future. 3. What about this experience am I grateful for? This is the hardest part, but it forces you to find the hidden gain. Perhaps a relationship was strengthened, or a worse disaster was avoided. This exercise creates the psychological space necessary to process the experience rather than running away from it in shame or anger. It prevents the gap from hardening into a permanent scar. When you use the experience transformer, you realize that there is no such thing as a total loss. Every experience, no matter how painful, is raw material that you can use to build a better version of yourself. When you live this way, you become unstoppable because you have reached a point where even your failures contribute to your growth. You are no longer at the mercy of the world. You are a master of the gain. As we conclude this exploration of the gap and the gain, it is vital to remember that the shift we've discussed is not a destination you reach, but a practice you maintain. The gap is a natural byproduct of the human brain's desire to survive and improve. It will always be there, whispering that you should be further along or that you haven't done enough. However, you now possess the awareness to recognize that voice for what it is, an illusion. By consciously choosing to live in the gain, you are choosing a life of agency, health, and sustainable high performance. The key insights we've covered, from Dan Jansen's intrinsic happiness to the biological longevity of positive-minded nuns, and from Rosie's tracked progress to Howard Getz's psychological flexibility, all point toward a single truth. Your happiness is your own responsibility. You do not need to wait for the world to give you permission to feel successful. You can claim that success right now by looking back at the mountain you have already climbed. As a practical takeaway, I encourage you to make the 90-day gain review a non-negotiable part of your life. Every 3 months, stop and document your wins. Look at the challenges you've faced and use the experience transformer to extract their value. This habit will ensure that your confidence is built on a foundation of reality rather than the shifting sands of future expectations. This knowledge matters because a life lived in the gap is a life of quiet desperation, where even the greatest achievements feel hollow. But a life lived in the gain is one of continuous expansion and profound gratitude. You have the power to transform your past from a burden into a resource, and your future from a source of anxiety into a field of possibility. The next time you feel the pull of the gap, remember how far you've come. Look at the gains. Celebrate the progress. And keep moving forward from a place of wholeness rather than lack. For more book summaries for free, install Zyroverse.